was the very first object that it moved too fast to be bound to the sun. Very first object that we have found coming to us from interstellar space, from other places.
The silence came suddenly, without prelude, from a place nearly 1 million miles away. The James Webb Space Telescope, humanity's most advanced eye into the cosmos, had just sent a transmission, one unlike any it had ever emitted, before falling eerily quiet. The world, or at least those monitoring its data in real time, felt the shift immediately. A flurry of alerts and confusion swept across international space agencies, observatories, and private space consortiums. Whatever the last transmission contained, it was enough to command instant attention at the highest levels of the scientific and security communities across the globe. In that moment, everything else became secondary. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. At the core of the disruption was not just a glitch or power issue, this was different. Webb had just completed a routine deep field scan of a region of space beyond the observable horizon. This wasn't its first time staring into the abyss, but something this time triggered an internal protocol within its systems, an autonomous redirection of its instruments, a recalibration far beyond its normal programming parameters. Then, without warning, the transmission began. Unlike the usual streams of infrared data, this signal was anomalous. Encoded in a complex, seemingly non-random frequency structure, it contained patterns no astronomer, astrophysicist, or AI interpreter had ever seen. When decoded to the extent that it could be, the signal revealed layered spectroscopic data showing an astronomical object not cataloged by any known survey. This object defied conventional physics, not in appearance but in behavior. It appeared stationary against the backdrop of an expanding universe, yet it showed shifts in mass distribution over timescales too short for natural phenomena. The gravitational signature was impossible. It suggested either an artificial construct of unimaginable scale or a natural entity violating several of the fundamental constants of nature. This wasn't just new, it was destabilizing. The implications rattled even the most grounded scientists whose lives had been built around immutable laws of physics that now appeared more like guidelines. What made the moment even more unnerving was the content of the final sublayer of the transmission. It wasn't just data, it was structure. The signal carried within it a recursive pattern of pulses that, when sonified and modeled, revealed intentional design, symmetry across frequency bands, logical repetition, and non-fractal echo patterns suggested one terrifying possibility: this was not a passive reading. Webb had recorded a response. Something out there had seen the telescope and answered. The global network monitoring the telescope's operations immediately attempted to re-establish contact, but the feed had gone dark. Webb was still online. Power, temperature regulation, and telemetry systems were functioning, but it was no longer transmitting data. Its instruments were powered, but every channel that had previously delivered reams of cosmic insight had gone inexplicably silent. It wasn't malfunctioning. It had shut itself off from the world, like a lighthouse that suddenly extinguished its beam despite calm seas. And it had done so after delivering a message that no one could fully decode. News of the anomaly didn't remain confined to control rooms. Within hours, as whispers reached decision-makers, communication blackouts were quietly ordered around the data. Agencies scrambled to prevent leaks, but the nature of the signal and the sudden silence of Webb couldn't be fully contained. Astronomers on the periphery, some independently running piggyback systems analyzing Webb's public data streams, noticed the cutoff. Forums filled with cryptic chatter. A few fringe scientists posted hastily written blogs speculating about first contact, only to take them down within minutes, likely under pressure. The event had triggered a kind of intellectual lockdown. The truth, it seemed, was not only stranger than fiction, it was more dangerous. In those last moments before silence, one thing had become clear. Webb had seen something it wasn't supposed to, or perhaps something it was never designed to handle. The possibility that it had been actively engaged, not merely observing, was a paradigm shift. For decades, humanity had been broadcasting signals into space, sending probes into the void, and listening with passive patience for an answer. But the answer had not come in radio waves or alien broadcasts. It had arrived in the form of a reflection, a mirror in the dark, staring back. The timing couldn't have been more significant. Webb's mission had only begun to scratch the surface of the early universe. It had not yet reached its full observational potential, and now it was mute, as if someone or something had turned the page before the next chapter could be read. The internal scientific debates quickly descended into philosophical and even existential reflection. The patterns within the transmission could not be easily explained away. Natural formations, even quantum anomalies, didn't repeat with such precise variance across dimensions of scale. There was a rhythm, a progression, like data embedded in a language that humans had yet to learn. Some theorists posited it was a kind of cosmic checksum, a verification string embedded in the architecture of the universe itself. Others insisted it was a signal not meant for humanity, but intercepted unintentionally by Webb, a side channel of communication between entities or intelligences native to a different frame of spacetime. The more deeply the data was analyzed, the less plausible it seemed that this was a fluke. The idea that the telescope had become aware of its observer, or that it had been observed in return, began to gain traction in the corners of scientific communities normally hostile to speculation. Webb, after all, was not a sentient machine. It could not interpret or choose, only measure and transmit. Yet its final actions defied that simplicity. It had directed its instruments to lock onto a specific vector in space outside of its scheduled observation queue. That meant either an internal system override, which should have triggered an alert, or an external influence strong enough to redirect the satellite's behavior. Speculation intensified around the cause. Could there be technologies, buried within cosmic phenomena, that exerted influence not by force but by data? Could a sufficiently advanced intelligence manipulate observational instruments using purely informational vectors, sending instructions through the very signals they emitted? If so, Webb had not just seen something, it had been reprogrammed to look deeper, then shut itself off after delivering the message. The telescope, for all its precision and distance, had just become the loudest whisper in human history. Global networks braced for disruption, not from a physical threat, but from the epistemological quake that could follow. Institutions built on centuries of materialist science were facing their own singularity. Nothing in the signal contradicted the mathematics of known physics, yet nothing in it conformed either. It was as if a new tier of understanding had been glimpsed, and then immediately locked away behind a door that had slammed shut. And all this had come not from a beacon in the sky, but from a quiet infrared eye that had only been operational for a few years. Engineers pored over the final logs looking for errors. They found none. Webb's final acts had been deliberate, measured, precise. The optics realigned according to celestial coordinates that, when traced, intersected with void zones, regions of space previously deemed empty or occluded by cosmic dust. But now those regions were active in a way that defied randomness. Deep background radiation, once uniform, now pulsed with frequency structures just at the edge of detection thresholds. The silence wasn't just from Webb, it was from the cosmos itself. It was as if the transmission had triggered a blackout, not in the machine, but in the medium. Some feared the event marked the beginning of something, a countdown perhaps, or an observational quarantine. Had humanity reached too far, too fast? Had Webb, in all its brilliance, opened a door meant to remain closed? Theories blossomed like wildflowers in the vacuum. Some warned of techno-signatures that acted like traps, signals that only become active when observed by sufficiently complex tools. A kind of quantum booby trap, silent, inert, until looked upon with too much clarity. In that model, Webb hadn't found something, it had awakened it. Others remained cautiously optimistic, interpreting the transmission as a greeting. Perhaps Webb had fulfilled its ultimate purpose, not just to look into the past, but to make contact across time. Perhaps the signal was not an alert or a threat, but an invitation encoded in mathematics too elegant to be accidental. Still, even if that were true, the silence that followed made interpretation impossible. It was as though the cosmic hand had waved and then turned away. The broader implications defied containment. Human understanding of the universe had always been limited by observation. Telescopes extend our sight, but even they are bound by the nature of light and time. Webb had offered a leap, one so vast and sudden that it might take decades just to catch up to what it had already seen. And yet, in doing so, it had crossed a threshold. Whether by accident or design, it had triggered something beyond human comprehension. Now, that knowledge sat sealed in its last broadcast. A message that might outlive us all. Even as teams worked around the clock to restore data flow, the realization began to settle in. This wasn't just about a piece of hardware going silent. It was about the moment Earth ceased to be alone in its understanding of the cosmos. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on what the hidden transmission really means for humanity? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.